You have to hand it to the Liberals. Instead of us talking about their eye-watering debts and deficits from the recent federal budget and their lack of action, instead we're talking about a Conservative MP, now Liberal MP, crossing the floor. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me is Brian Lilley, who's covered the budget for us and all these political machinations for the last few weeks, and watching this all unfold. Brian, I think my assessment is right. Instead of us having the discussion about the most expensive government in Canadian history, the largest debt we've ever seen, over $1.2 trillion, massive deficits, nearly double what it was last year. We're talking about a Conservative MP crossing the floor. You got to hand it to the Liberals. Their timing is impeccable.
Yeah, so they got Chris d'Entremont, MP from Nova Scotia, riding of Acadianapolis. He's been involved in Conservative politics for a long time, Adrienne. This is what is remarkable. You know, I'm seeing people online say, well, he was never really a Conservative. He's always just a Liberal. He's a bit of a red Tory, yeah, but volunteer at the federal level, activist at the federal level, the provincial part of the provincial PC government down there in the past, and he's been an MP since 2019. And in fact, I want to play you this clip because he was saying just a few weeks ago exactly what you're saying about how bad the Liberals are with our money.
We warned that Liberals, their out-of-control spending and massive deficits were irresponsible. But of course, they didn't listen. And now, after 6 months under a new Prime Minister who promised financial discipline, Canadians are still waiting. He said they'd be judged by the cost, he'd be judged by the cost at the grocery store. Well, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are judging him, and they are not impressed.
So that was d'Entremont a few weeks ago saying we're in trouble if things don't get better. Guess what? We've taken a look at the budget, and it's a horrible mess. I can give you all the numbers if you want. It is a disaster, but you're right. We're talking about floor crossings and lots of rumors about other potential MPs crossing. So far, that hasn't happened. One of them even responding to me releasing her name and putting out a video to say, oh, no, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, to put that into context, d'Entremont only won his riding in the most recent federal election by just over 500 votes. So it was very close. And he was the lone Conservative MP in a sea of Liberal MPs from the province of Nova Scotia. But now it's all Liberal red, I suppose. There's been some mixed reaction in his riding. It would appear to me that mostly it seems that the constituents are okay with this move. But, you know, there's always the ongoing discussion. We've seen floor crossings from all parties, but that they should stand for a by-election. That's not what they were elected for. So I think that sort of political intrigue is going to carry on. But let's. I do want to talk about the budget, but just as far as
just on that, you know, everyone says, well, there should be a law against this. Look, this is part of our system, and I get the anger, I get the frustration, I get the sentiment, but it's long been part of our system. And you know, Sir Winston Churchill not only crossed from the Conservatives to the Liberals, he went back.
That's right.
What's the saying? It's one thing to rat, it's another thing to re-rat, which he did. And this is a fairly consequential floor crossing. It's the biggest one since Belinda Stronach went from the Conservatives to the Liberals, but Stephen Harper poached a few in his time.
That's right.
So, you know, it's going to happen, and I'm not sure we could pass a law. And I use the example of, like, sometimes you may have to if the party you're with goes really off the rails. That didn't happen here. D'Entremont wanted to be speaker. He'd been deputy speaker before. His party didn't back him for that. He doesn't get along very well with Pierre Poilievre. Party didn't back him to be speaker. The Liberals are literally going around offering things to Conservatives to try and get them to switch.
So I do want to talk about that. I want to talk about sort of before we delve into the budget and those eye-watering numbers, the leadership for Pierre Poilievre with respect to this. The Liberals are now 2 MPs away from a majority. And so that's why this is particularly consequential. And with all these rumors swirling around of this MP or that MP, and Liberals making offers like, you know, their kids in a candy store, it's appealing, it's intriguing. Is there a sense of Pierre Poilievre's leadership? Is it the style? Is he losing a grip? What is it? What are you hearing?
Well, I think it was a personality clash between d'Entremont and Poilievre. As I said, d'Entremont is more of a red Tory. Pierre Poilievre is definitely not, but d'Entremont ran the first time under Andrew Scheer, who is not a red Tory either, and in fact, very much a SOCON, and he felt comfortable running under him. So
Right.
I think a lot of this is, his own personal gain, what's in it for him. The fact is, the whole speaker issue. He, I'm told, was planning not to run again because he didn't think he could win his riding. Maybe this is a way to save his riding, but we'll see what happens come next election. I've seen a lot of these over the years. Sometimes they work out for the MP, sometimes they don't. I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in this happened because of weak leadership from Poilievre. I still think he's going to win his leadership review pretty handily come
Yes.
January, unless things change. And it's what happens after that that will determine, whether he is the conservative leader going into the next election. I don't think the party's going to dump him at this point.
All right. Well, all of this is consequential because of the budget that was just presented. And you've written about it extensively. And we're talking about debt and deficit numbers that have put us as the most expensive government in Canadian history. As I mentioned, the deficit almost doubled from where we were last year. The percentage of debt to GDP ratio, and maybe that's a boring thing for people to hear, but it's important because it's the amount of money that we spend to service the debt that are not going to services. We're spending more on paying for the debt than we are on healthcare. And these things matter. They're important. On the one side, there were big spending commitments. And then on the other, there was an attempt at some austerity.
No,
But
no,
it didn't
false.
land.
That is fake news.
None of it landed.
So, okay. So they keep saying that they're cutting spending. When? Well, next year. That's like, do you remember from the Popeye show years ago, Wimpy, I'll gladly pay you Thursday for a hamburger today. They're going to rein in spending next year. This year, it's still up 7.2%. Mark Carney's been going around saying, well, Justin Trudeau's was increasing spending, program spending by 8% a year. That's unsustainable. Well, his program spending has gone up by 7.2%. That is also unsustainable. And telling me that you'll cut spending next year? No, I'll believe it when I see it. I've never covered a government of any stripe that meets their long-term projections. They're always off. It is hard to predict the future. So I cut government some slack on that. But I also don't believe them when they tell me, oh, we're going to have a huge surplus or a huge deficit or we're going to cut spending. But this deficit number, this $78.3 billion, well, in 18 months ago, in April 2024, they said it would be $38.9 billion. And then they updated that last December to say, no, next fiscal year, 25-26, it'll be $42 billion. And well, it's 78.3. You mentioned spending more on servicing the debt than on healthcare. $55 billion to service the debt. That's just the interest payment on, the nation's credit card debt. 55 billion on that, 54 billion in federal health transfers. So this budget is a mess. There's a couple of things that are good in it. They got rid of the luxury tax. There was a 10% luxury tax that didn't raise them a lot of money, about $30 million a year. But you know what it did? It stopped Bombardier from selling a single plane. I know people love to hate Bombardier. They are not the welfare case they used to be. They've trimmed down to they just make private jets for the global market. They make jets for the military. They haven't sold a single plane in Canada in the 5 years this tax has been in place because, well, it adds 10% to the cost. That puts jobs at risk in Mississauga, where the plane is made, in Montreal, where other parts of production are done. So that's a good move. There's some business tax changes that are good, but nothing was as bold as they claimed it was going to be, Adrienne.
All right, Brian. So for the elbows up crowd, that's what we heard about during the election, and that's what Carney campaigned on. What in this budget then shows that Canada can finally extricate itself from our heavy reliance on the United States being
Nothing.
our only trading partner?
Nothing. This was not the bold generational transformation that they promised. Look, that business tax change, they're calling a super deduction. That is a good move, but it's not a big bold move. It's it's what governments do. So what they're doing is for someone in manufacturing, production, processing, and you buy new equipment, you buy or build a new plant, you're going to be able to write that down in 1 year. And if you do that, we'll have a more competitive tax rate. But going forward, your taxes go back up. The marginal effective tax rate goes up, and we end up higher than the United States and some other jurisdictions. It has been Canadian industrial policy going back to at least Sir Wilfrid Laurier to have lower taxes than the United States so that we are an attractive place to
That's right.
invest and do business, rather than saying, well, I'll just go to the US then. Well, the US cut taxes under Trump 1, and they cut taxes more in the big, beautiful bill that they just passed a little while ago. We needed something that was going to put us below them, or at least make us more competitive. We did not do that. This was the chance for Mark Carney to do that. He didn't. He doubled down on the industrial carbon tax, which you could have gotten rid of to make us more competitive. We're going around talking about helping steel mills weather the storm. Well, what do you think Stelco, Dofasco, Algoma are going to end up paying? The industrial
Yeah.
carbon tax. They're talking about maybe, possibly, potentially getting rid of the emissions cap for the oil and gas industry, but that was a hint. That was not a commitment in this budget. So just like so much of what Carney's done, these are small steps, and it's not just me saying it, it's the Business Council of Canada. And I'm agreeing with Andrew Coyne in the Globe and Mail and Susan Delacourt in the Toronto Star, who also said, hey, you promised big moves. Where are they?
That's
This
right.
budget is not that.
So, last question, in spite of all of this, will this budget pass?
I think so. I've never thought that we were going to head to an election over this. They picked up Chris d'Entremont, so they've got an extra vote. Elizabeth May has said that she won't vote for it. The Bloc has said they won't vote for it. The Conservatives won't. The NDP is up in the air. They've got 7. I can't see someone like Heather McPherson, who is running to be NDP leader, voting for this budget. But maybe she doesn't show up. Maybe some people abstain. Maybe you catch a cold that day, Adrienne, and the budget passes.
That's right.
So there's very good chance that this budget passes. I don't see us going to an election. This is not the type of budget you would bring in if you wanted to trigger an election. And as you and I and Lori were saying last week, the only way we have an election is if the Liberals want one.
Well, Canada, the Liberals' layaway spending plan is going to cost us all billions, and with a deficit and a debt in the trillions, doesn't seem that Canada is going to be charting its own strong and bold economic path anytime soon. Well, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and go to thetorontosun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.